Hello and namaste, dear friends and listeners. The Almost Daily ZenCast presents today's Nugget of Zen. In order to trust your intuition, you have to heal your intuition. Hello and namaste. As always, I humbly thank you for tuning in. I am your favorite talk radio style podcast show host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, exploring the radical intersection of politics, society, and spirituality in an unorthodox fashion with music. That's the show, and you're listening to it. Have you noticed how trendy it is to talk about intuition in the spiritual community? Now, I'm not trying to pick a beef with my people. The spiritual community is my tribe. But I've noticed that as a community, we tend to perpetuate stereotypes and stick to these stereotypes without digging deeper beneath the surface. I fully endorse the idea of helping others realize that they can rely on their intuition. The tricky part is that we must heal our intuition first. As a spiritual person, I've learned this lesson the hard way. We were born free of conditioning, but from day one, everyone around us, from family to complete strangers, has bombarded us with passively perpetuated social conditioning. Some of this is benign. Some of this is indeed useful. Remember what Confucius said. We are in need of social conditioning until we no longer need it. That was me paraphrasing. But what he was pointing to is that in order to create a well-organized society, we do indeed need to teach ourselves, condition ourselves into some agreed-upon conventions. In fact, language itself is a living tool of agreed-upon conventions. The letters T, R, E, E have no inherent connection to the living plants that we identify as trees. We have conditioned ourselves into accepting that the word tree represents the broad category of living plants that grow past certain heights and have other certain qualities in common. This is useful. But as with everything, there is a light and a dark side. And we have been raised in a postmodern context, a contemporary gestalt, a global ennui, a species-wide collective societal conditioning paradigm. From little things to how to share our toys in school to huge things like which party do you politically identify with and vehemently defend. Our intuition is an innate spiritual, mental, emotional faculty. In other words, it is not one thing. It is a complex of component functions that we identify with this one word. Our intuition is not automatically, inherently flawless. Our intuition has been impacted by our lifetime's worth of social, ideological, political, religious, philosophical, and every other kind of conditioning you can imagine, because we've grown up surrounded by it. In order for us as spiritual seekers to truly, genuinely be able to rely on our intuition, we must first take responsibility for working through all the tough, challenging, painful spiritual work required to heal ourselves. If we don't do that, we run a very high risk of putting our trust in a flawed, dare I say, corrupt intuition. If we take a step back and look very seriously at the world around us in a non-judgmental, non-biased way, we can see examples of our intuition being trusted and it not delivering the goods. This is how we get to spiritual bypassing, right? The trendy new sin of the spiritual community. 10 years ago, I had not heard of the term spiritual bypassing. Was it being bandied about? Perhaps. I just had not come across it yet. But in the last 8 years, it has become a very trending thing to point out and discuss and debate. There are people who are self-proclaimed spiritualists or spiritual beings or whatever label you prefer that have clearly put their trust in their intuition without having fully invested in rooting out whatever deep-seated and latent ego trap corruption may be strangleholding their intuition. This is how we get spiritual people who also buy into Donald Trump's political lies. It's been one of the things I've encountered during the brief and yet profoundly never-ending period that we now call Trumptopia, and that's spiritualists, people on social media with their profile pictures being, chakra maps and several posts about love being the answer, who then turn around and vehemently defend Donald Trump. At first, I was shocked and amazed. How can someone who, and I don't mean to pick on anyone in particular, right? Like, I'm speaking in the broadest general terms, and if I reference anyone ever in my show, unless they've asked me to name them, I usually go with an anonymous paraphrasing of their statement. And I have seen chakra healing light workers defend Donald Trump's insanity. How does a person who meditates, who studies the mystic teachings of ye olde ancient mystic times, simultaneously buy into the political indoctrination of Donald Trump? and his agenda to create us versus them divisions, perpetuate pre-existing us versus them divisions, and create a massive cacophony of chaos with them. I've been thinking about this very, very deeply, and then it hit me. I was having a conversation with one particular relatively new social media acquaintance. We were having a direct private conversation, and I was asking them about their sources, and they fluctuated and vacillated and wavered between saying that they were receiving intuitive guidance. Now, I'm not one to claim that intuitive guidance is bullshit, but I am here to point out that through my own personal experience and my direct observation of others, whom I know personally, it is painfully clear that our intuition can get co-opted and hijacked intellectually, spiritually, energetically. Let us take a moment to remember that the bad guys out there in the world are not separate from us. They are not separate from the divinity that we spiritual people strive to commune with. They are players in the same game. Now, when I use words like game, illusion, matrix, I don't mean to decry all things as false or fake. The matrix is very real. The matrix is a living, holographic consciousness energy being. And the matrix is responsible for all the good guys, all the bad guys, and all the sheeple and parrot people in between. We are the matrix. Here in this dance, in this ongoing role play, in this infinite unfolding fractal of consciousness experiencing all probable outcomes of all possible combinations of all imaginable configurations, we find ourselves dealing with polemics and absolutist thinking. I've been contemplating doing a whole episode on absolutist monolithic thinking, but I'll drop you like my solid nugget of thought on that here. Absolutist thinking is an ego trap. If you think that all, insert here your favorite scapegoat, if all Mexicans are drug dealers, you're wrong, categorically. Right? That's one I can personally debunk. Trump said at one point, said all these illegal immigrants are drug dealers and rapists. Oh, and of course he did throw in the sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, lip service to that. Of course, some of them, he assumes, are fine people. But you'll note that he lays down an absolutist statement, which he sort of passively says it's not an absolute, but then he returns to the rhetoric, all of which is anchored in absolutist thinking. Now, I'm not trying to fall into the opposite pit trap, right? You can't equivocate. There are definitely blocks of people who unite around concepts and are pretty consistent in their demographic, for sure. But it is this kind of layered ego trap of many ego traps that I'm trying to get to in terms of like what we're discussing today. As with free speech, our intuition comes with a burden of responsibility. One of the variations of the statement of trust your intuition is do what makes you happy. At first, that sounds like a beautiful, uplifting thing to say. you're not doing what makes you happy, go do what makes you happy, right? You're working a dead-end job in some field that you don't have a passion for. Of course that's not the best thing for you. You should go do something that makes you happy. But let's stop and really apply our critical thinking. Sociopathic axe murderers are doing what makes them happy. So we cannot perpetuate that statement without going into the nuances of healing ourselves first so that we have a healthy relationship with that elusive state of feeling happiness. Punching people in the face makes some people feel happy. So should we applaud them to go around randomly punching people in the face? Of course not. Just as we would not embrace and welcome an axe murderer and say, please, by all means, continue axe murdering. It's making you happy. No one would do that. No one in their right mind, no one that is healed. And there's the clause. That's the catch, my friends. Terrible things could make you feel a temporary sense of pleasure which you would misidentify as happiness, or might actually literally make you feel happy. Likewise, insidious, damaging misinformation can appear to be the intuitive guidance that we're seeking. Before you blindly trust yourself, you must put in the effort to heal thyself. This is why the ancient mystics always taught healing practices. From Yeshua to Krishna, everybody in between. My favorite is Mithra, because not only does it inherently reference myth, which makes you question what does myth mean and how should we reevaluate all our mythologies, but it also sounds like a Japanese anime character that might be fighting Godzilla or something. Oh, duh, it reminds me of Mothra. Our intuition is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. And before we start wielding that tool with authoritarian-like certainty, we must make sure that A, we have healed ourselves, B, we have healed the tool, for it is a living, organic, energy consciousness construct in and of itself. And we must be sure that we have freed ourselves and the tool of any subtle, strangulating, ego trap corruption. We must put in that effort, my friends. Just as you wouldn't try to run a marathon out of the blue without training, we need to go through the steps of healing ourselves the way you would train for a marathon. We need to focus on where we are spiritually, energetically, emotionally, psychologically, and get true clarity on these states of our being. We must identify where we are suffering from trauma and address that trauma. If we don't go through that effort first, we will put faith in our jacked up intuition and do jacked up, fucked up things. And then we will try to defend our jacked up behavior or proclamations or statements by saying, but it's my intuition. But that's the same as an axe murderer saying, but it makes me happy and I'm supposed to do what makes me happy. Dear friends, the good news is there are an abundance of ways to address this need for healing. If you like complicated, sophisticated systems, there are really complex and sophisticated ways of meditating towards healing. If you like simple and direct, there are simple and direct methodologies. It is not your fault that you had to endure an endless gauntlet of social conditioning, some of it benign, some of it useful, some of it toxic. But as you step into your spiritual growth, as you take up your spiritual calling, you must make sure that you do the tough, difficult, challenging, often tedious, sometimes painful work required to establish true clarity of being, clarity of sight, clarity of feeling, clarity of mind, clarity of energy. If you have not achieved that clarity, you must always be vigilant and wary and be second-guessing and analyzing and questioning your own thinking, intuitive or otherwise. Because ego is not some abstraction, right? It is a measurable force in the universe. It is a complex and sophisticated aspect of our energy network that is part of the human species. And even once we have engaged in that healing, we must always remain vigilant, because ego's savvy. Ego is down with the rules of the game. Ego knows how to break the rules of the game. Ego knows how to bend the rules of the game. Ego knows how to do these things better than we do because it is an antecedent to our experience. It is part of what manifests us. Now, I've gone into some of those cosmological details in other episodes, and I hope you dig them up and find them. But don't worry, I'll probably come full circle and talk about them again in a future episode. But today's nugget is to remind you to always be investing in your own spiritual healing. This will improve the clarity with which your intuition works. Even if you feel like your intuition is doing pretty good, it never hurts to double down. You know why? Because it's not just about you. It's about everybody. Every individual on the human species network of spiritual energy. Every human individual is connected to everyone else. And when any one individual elevates themselves through genuine, cathartic, spiritual healing, you contribute to the elevation of everyone else on the network. And if there's anything that our manifest physical reality is challenging us to understand, is that we are indeed each other's keepers. As brothers and sisters in one giant family of great diversity, we are simultaneously all one. We are simultaneously in on it all together. And that our efforts must work towards uplifting the entire species, or else we will just stay on this treadmill of life and death. We will keep fighting each other in this meat grinder of political ideology and war profiteering. As always, friends, I humbly thank you for tuning in. This has been today's Nugget of Zen. And if you've got thoughts, questions, comments, good, bad, or indifferent, by all means, I humbly invite you to participate in the public discourse that is the idea behind this show. The most direct way is to come on over to Spreaker.com/show/ZenCast. That is SPREAKER.com/show/ZenCast, one word. Check out the show. Leave your comments for any episode that really inspired you or challenged you or made you want to know more, etc. Om Shani Metta Shanti Om Namaste. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. And when you find that blossom, pay it forward, friends.